Hello, and welcome to Talking Data Equity for Friday, June 6th, 2025. My name is Heather Krause, and I'm a mathematical statistician and the founder of an organization called We All Count. And one of the things that We All Count does most Fridays is that we have an event called Talking Data Equity. And this is actually this month is the 3rd-year anniversary of Talking Data Equity. We actually ran it for a year before it was officially named Talking Data Equity. It used to be called Data Amnesty. And when it was called Data Amnesty for the first year, that was for people to ask questions that they were too embarrassed to ask in front of their colleagues or friends. And that was super cool. I loved that. And then we decided to kind of broaden the scope of what we did together on Fridays. And that's when it started to get the name Talking Data Equity. And the format has stayed the same. We've had the same Zoom link for all of these 3 years, and we hope to have the same Zoom link so that once you have arrived here, you never have to kind of figure out like each week what the Zoom link is. You can just use the same Zoom link. And the idea is for anybody from any sector, any part of the world, any level of technical or data prowess can join and talk about the practical, concrete ways that we are figuring out together how to align the choices that we're making in our data projects with our equity goals, with our equity priorities. And every single Friday looks different. Sometimes we go really deep into kind of a technical methodology or a concrete tool. Sometimes we have special guests. And once in a while, we just have me, and that's what it is today. So today, you're going to have a conversation with me, Heather Krause, the founder of We All Count. And what we're going to do, actually, before I go into that, let me share a couple more, thank you, technical details. First of all, the sessions that we have most Fridays happen at noon Toronto time. And they are also recorded because we know that noon Toronto time isn't always a good time for everybody. So they are recorded and shared in our We All Count Data Equity Forum. And you can find that here at the link. And it does look like last week's is missing in action. So we'll see what's going on there. We do have a recording from last week, the amazing Tamika Butler. Highly recommend you check that out if you weren't here, but don't check it out yet because it's not there. So it'll be there soon. Second thing is that if you ever are wondering what is happening on a weekly basis with Talking Data Equity, like who's our guest or what's coming up, you can always go to the main Talking Data Equity page. I just put a link in there. And in addition to the list of topics and special guests at that Talking Data Equity page, you'll also see a form where you can suggest guests. And you also have a second form there where you can suggest questions. And the third thing that we've just added to that page is live calendar links. So yes, we do know, and we are also experiencing frustration around how to set up the calendar for Talking Data Equity. I'm not going to bore you with all the technical backend, but because of the way we have Talking Data Equity structured, and because we use the same Zoom link every week, most of the conventional ways to set these calendars up don't work. And so we continue to try different technical systems. We have a new system that we're just testing out. And so you can provide us feedback about how that's going. And if you have some magical solution for a calendar invite that needs to have a couple of thousand people added to it where the Zoom link stays the same, but we don't want to make the Zoom link public, you can write to me and tell me your solution, because you maybe have a better idea than anything we've been able to figure out. But we are working on something new. You will notice on that page there are new calendar links, and we do know that sometimes it feels very frustrating, the way that we have the calendar links set up. Please do know that we are working on it and we are trying. And we also are very much trying to keep this event free. We pay our speakers. We pay our speakers $1,000 for their time. And so we really can't spend another $1,000 on calendaring. So we're doing our best. And if you have an idea, let me know. I think our newest solution is our best solution so far. It's still not perfect, but it's pretty good. All right. So speaking of that Talking Data Equity page, one of the things that we have on that page is we have a space where you can say the questions that you would like us to talk about, or the tools or the topics that you're looking for resources on. And you can fill that out, and we do really read it, and we try and find speakers and solutions that we can bring to you. And what I'm going to do today is thank you for all the calendar empathy. I'm very, very grateful, because it does bother me a lot that we don't have a good solution. One of the things I'm going to do today is try to address one of the really, really common kind of process questions. One of the really common process questions is what does this data equity choice tracking thing actually look like in process? How do you do it on a real world project? So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to take you through, in a very, very fast kind of way, because we only have an hour, what it looks like a little bit to try and apply these tools and the ideas behind the data equity framework to a real world project. And I know some of you are attending a We All Count event for the very first time. And some of you are a very valued and regular part of the community. And I want to kind of level set a tiny bit. I don't want to take up the whole hour by giving you like a presentation on what We All Count is. I'm just going to show you about 3 slides. And fundamentally, the data equity framework that we work with here at We All Count addresses the fact that very good, very rigorous, very reliable quantitative projects are not value neutral. And this is a myth that most of us, myself very much included, have been taught, that as long as we do something that looks like this slide here, where we ask a question and then we do our best to get some objective data, do an objective analysis, and get an objective result, we are doing good science. The science the results that we've created are value neutral. This is a myth, and we have 3 years of videos that you can watch from Talking Data Equity that'll illustrate the many, many ways that this is like a demonstrable myth, and that we need to stop pouring resources into it. But this is actually good news, because the reason that this is a myth, that data projects are not value neutral, is that data projects can be viewed really as just a linked series of choices. And there's hundreds and hundreds of choices that go into every single data project, even if it's a tiny little, like how many people came to our reading club at the library on Saturday morning. That small one and done project involves hundreds of choices. And if you're doing anything more complex, it involves thousands of choices. And each one of those choices are the mechanisms that are used to embed lived experiences, priorities, and worldviews into our quantitative evidence. And this is actually great news, because these choices are unavoidable. They're there whether we like it or not. And that means that we can learn to pay attention to these choices in a way that leads to an alignment between the priorities that we have and what we're actually doing in our data projects. This is very, very good news. And more good news is that paying attention to these mathematical choices actually produces really rigorous, very reliable, replicable, and equitable science. We're not stuck in an uncomfortable position where we have to choose between kind of accurate, useful, rigorous science or equitable science. Paying attention to the choices that we make result in both. So this is great news. And this is what we do here at We All Count. We focus on learning how to notice choices. And don't worry, I'm going to share this with you in a minute. We learn how to notice choices, document choices, and make choices in alignment with our equity goals. And one of our getting started documents lists these 99 choices. Of course, that is not a comprehensive list of choices, nor do we think that you should start by paying attention to 99 choices. Really, the way to go is one choice at a time. So again, I'm sharing all of this just to kind of level set and introduce you to the data equity framework, which is kind of the wayfinding guide that We All Count uses to help anybody in any sector, any level of technical and data comfort to kind of pay attention to the choices that are getting made in their data projects and grow their competency again, bit by bit. This is not an all or nothing situation. Grow their competency at figuring out how to make these choices, consider our options, and make the choices in ways that align with the priorities and the context of the specific project that we're working on. And that last part's really important. If somebody tries to hand you a recipe that, these are all the choices that you need to make every single time to have a certified equitable project, you can know right away that that's going to be a problem, because the options that we select in each one of these choices can't be the same for every project in every context, because our priorities and our values and our goals are different. So instead of learning a recipe of what we have to do, what we're trying to do is learn to think about data projects as a series of choices and notice the choices and consider and document the choices. Okay. So that's what we do here at We All Count. And in general, recommend as a flexible, adaptable strategy to improving the equity in your data projects. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to walk you through a real world project that was actually one of the very, very first projects where we started developing these data equity tools. And I'm going to demonstrate to you kind of how we documented and made some of the choices and then went back and changed some of the choices. And as we do that, I'm also going to share with you some of the resources that you can use to do this in your own projects. And those of you who know me well are familiar with this project because it has a very special place in my heart. This project is a project that took place in rural Bangladesh, and it was a dairy value chain project. So it was a project about cows, how to get more productivity from cows, how women that owned cows in rural Bangladesh could work together and learn new ways to take care of cows in order to improve the quality and the amount of milk that the cows produced, so that, first of all, their families would have milk to drink. Secondly, they could sell the extra milk. And the idea was that would have a good effect in lots of different ways. So that's the basics of the project. And I worked on this project for about 6 months from my home and office in Toronto. And then I got to work on this project on the ground in Bangladesh. And it was that difference that really opened my eyes to how important and how consequential the nitty gritty choices that we make in data projects are. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing that screen and those slides because I think we've covered that. And I am actually going to start sharing with you how we went through and made some choices. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to share a link with you to a Google Doc. And this is kind of the meta document. So the document that I just shared with you now. And you do not need to be able to access this document to participate or listen to today's talk. I know some of you aren't allowed to access Google Docs. But what that is that's kind of the mega list of links that I'm going to be showing you today. So what I'm mainly going to be showing you today is two things. Yep, great. I'm going to start sharing my screen again. I think I'm just going to share my Google Chrome. I know that's always a little bit risky, but we'll go for it. All right. So what I'm going to share with you today is I'm going to share the data equity framework choice documentation template that we use. I'm going to share here the link to that. And yeah, great. So this is a template that we use on pretty much every project that we work on and pretty much every project that we consult on or we collaborate on. And I haven't given you the ability to edit this particular one, but what you can do is you can click right here and then you can get your own copy. And once you have your own copy, you can edit it, you can download it, you can make changes to make it more suitable for your own work. And yes, you do have to have a Google account in order to make a copy. And I know that there's lots of reasons not to have a Google account. But again, much like the calendar, we all count is not a software company, and so we haven't developed a template for this that is in a piece of standalone software. In order to give you a shareable template, I have to choose some software provider. Google's not the only one, but Google is the one we chose. And again, I absolutely know that that's not perfect. Every single choice we make has pros and cons. And what we need to do is notice that we're making a choice and be honest about it. So we have made a choice and we made this in Google. Okay, so the idea behind this template is that we want to make sure that as you go through any kind of a data project, you have a place where you can notice the choices, document the choices, and track how you made the choices. And again, there's a little bit of introductory text here. I'm not going to read it, but you can see that we've provided you a little bit of guidance. And the areas of red text are where we recommend that you start. First, we recommend that you notice a choice that is getting made and that you fill in that choice. This is, again, when you have your own version, this will be an editable document. It is editable by me. So notice the choice and then go through the stages of considering the options, gathering the options, considering the options, and creating a record of what option you're choosing and why. So again, I want this to seem a little bit less abstract. So we're going to work on the specific project that I'm talking about. I'm going to share with you the second link in case you can't access the Google Doc because not everybody can. So here is a short summary of this project? Because again, I'm trying to do this in an hour. So the short name for this project is the SDVC. So that was the Strengthening the Dairy Value Chain Project. And as I just described, this was the basic idea behind this project was to improve the way that the dairy value chain was working for female owners of cows in rural Bangladesh. And of course, lots and lots of choices went into this. And when you go through the creation of a project, following the steps of the data equity framework, one of the first things that we recommend that you focus on is funding or resource allocation, because those choices are very, very important. And if you want to get in depth into the tools that we use to do this, I'm happy to point you in the direction of a important video on the funding web. But what we're doing today is we're practicing documenting the choices. So choice number one is who gets paid to participate in this project. That is a very important choice that seems like it might not be a data choice, but it very much is a data choice. It's going to influence what data you end up collecting, the quality of the data you're going to collect. It's going to influence the choices you make in analysis. It's going to, in fact, change the results that are going to come out of your project. So that's the first choice that I'm going to document as I'm working with my team. And the tool that we use to kind of concretize this, as I've mentioned, is called the funding web. And again, I'm not going to teach you today how to use the funding web. We have some videos on that, and also some written directions, but I am going to show you really briefly that when I got to that choice in this project, which is who's going to get paid to participate, we got a couple of different people who were involved in this project to sit down and make a funding web. And a funding web is where you're basically going to make, again, I'm not going to teach you how, but you're going to make a diagram of the key constituencies or the stakeholders involved in this project. And you're going to draw some arrows that show how money, which are these yellow arrows, is changing hands in this project. How data, which is these purple arrows, is changing hands in this project, and who gets to make decisions. Those are the green arrows. So this is how we consider the option in one of the very first choices that happens in almost every data project, which is who gets paid to be part of this? Who's economically incentivized to be part of this project? And the reason that I have three different funding webs here on this Miro board is because, if possible, we like to get different stakeholders, different people from different parts of this project to create a funding web that shows their idea of this project. And we ask them to make it independently. And then we gather people together and we compare and we contrast and we talk about the options. So that's why there's three here. And eventually we would sit down and kind of synthesize these three into one. So who gets paid to participate in this project? This is an open choice. This choice hasn't yet been made in the very early days of this project. Stage one, we're going to gather the options and we're going to fill in who gets to contribute options. And in this case, we're going to write each stakeholder group will bring a funding web. So we're going to assign each stakeholder group an opportunity to help us provide options about who's going to get paid. And then as we go along, we can list the different stakeholder groups. And then we can record the options to be considered. Or frankly, if I was doing this, I would put a link here to the Miro board, to the funding web Miro board. I wouldn't actually write this all out. You don't have to write every single option of every single choice. I would simply put a link to Miro board, right? So what I'm showing you is how we're considering the options. I mean, how we're gathering the options, Stage 2 is where we're going to consider the options. The tool that we're going to use to consider the options is, again, the funding web. There's a lag. You get the idea. There we go. Identify the process by which the ultimate decision will be made. So are we going to decide by consensus who gets paid to be part of this? Is there a single determination? In other words, is there one decision maker about the financial options in this particular project? Are we going to vote? What method are we going to use to decide who gets paid to participate in this? And of course, the big option in this choice is going to be, are the women who own the cows who are going to be contributing the data going to be paid for their participation, paid for their contribution of data? That's the big option that we're going to get to as we go through this particular part of the document. We know that if I'm going to zoom in here, pretty much everybody knows that the big kind of international organizations that are getting grants to produce and deliver this program are going to get paid. The big question is, are the farmers, are the women that owns the cows, are they going to get paid, and how much, and who's going to decide that? All right. Sorry about the crazy barking dog. All right. So that's the very first choice. And then in the end, sorry, after I do stage 1 and stage 2, I'm going to get to stage 3 of this choice document. The internet is very slow in Toronto today. Okay. So stage 1, we've assigned people to bring us options. What are all the possible options of who's going to get paid to participate in this project? Stage 2, we're going to consider the options. We're going to sit down, we're going to look at that funding web exercise, and we're going to use a process to decide where the money is going to flow in this project and how that choice is going to be justified relative to our equity goals. It's going to be very hard to say that we're doing this in a woman-centered way, for example, if the women aren't going to get paid. And so it forces us to notice and document that choice as it gets made, rather than just kind of replicating an assumption about how these projects go. And then finally, stage 3 in this template is we're going to create a record. We're going to record the final choice. We're going to make notes of the processes. And then if we are going to really go in depth, we're going to link it back to what we all count calls the motivation touchstone, which is, why are we doing this project and who are we trying to center? All right. So that's a very kind of abstract feeling level of choice. Of course, who gets paid to participate in a data project is actually one of the least abstract choices that gets made. It's very real world, but it feels very abstract because often if you're a data practitioner, you're not getting to make that choice on a day-to-day process, on a day-to-day basis. So I'm going to continue to kind of walk through the data equity framework and the small summary of this project, and just help you notice a couple of other choices. Of course, even in a project write-up of this size, there are hundreds and hundreds of choices. And so, of course, one of the really important choices that we talk about a lot is how the basics are being operationalized. So here we have, I'm going to switch this color. Here we have the project description. And the project description is that The SDVC program, the Strengthening the Dairy Value Chain program, seeks to double the monthly income of small scale producers in Bangladesh, creating more sustainable livelihoods for dairy farmers by incorporating them into a strengthened dairy value chain. So if I gave this project description or this objective or purpose to each one of you and asked you to go collect data and bring me back the results, you'd each come back with different results because this is way too abstract to actually lead to any kind of consistent, aligned set of data collection choices and analysis choices and reporting choices, right? So, one of the early things we want to do is we want to pay attention to the choices that are going to get made when we operationalize this purpose. So, how are we going to operationalize monthly income in this project? Turned out to be a very, very tricky, culturally sensitive, and important question because monthly income can be defined in lots of different ways. It can be dairy only monthly income. It can be one woman's monthly income from dairy only. It can be one woman's monthly income from all of her income generating activities. It can be one household's monthly income from dairy. It can be one household's monthly income from all income generating activities. Those are a couple of options out of many. And you can already see that the one that we choose is going to be very culturally sensitive. It's a very specific worldview to even think about income on an individual basis. Some cultures think you can measure income individually. Some cultures think you can't measure income individually. That's actually, really, really weird that we would think that there'd be one person that would be linked to one amount of income. It's very culturally sensitive. And this is one of the places, if we don't pay attention to this, we're going to accidentally generate data and results that are aligned with a worldview that we're not trying to center, that we're not trying to replicate. So again, one of the series of choices that's very, very important. So I would hear, I'm going to stop using this because the internet is just not my friend right now in Toronto. So, oh, here we go. I would copy and paste this and I would just fill in a new choice. So one of the choices is how we're going to operationalize this word monthly income. Monthly income is a very big deal to this project. There's going to be a lot of different social locations. The funder is going to want one thing because they have one idea about what matters for monthly income. The women that own the cows are going to have a different idea. The families of the women that own the cows are going to have a different idea. And of course, none of those are monoliths. There's going to be variation. And the tool that we use to help you do that is called the motivation touchstone document. Again, I'm not going to go through this with you. This is not a teaching you how to do this session. This is just showing you in a very compressed, speeded up time frame, the types of conversations that we would be having along the way of a project. How the concrete nitty gritty of noticing, documenting, and making choices actually works when we're not just like making an idealized version that I get to use to illustrate something to you, but when we're just like sweating it out, trying to figure out how we're going to come to a consensus about what the heck is monthly income. Okay. So I'm not going to go through the motivation touchstone with you right now. It has directions. We also have videos that can teach you how to use this, but I am going to show you really briefly that a big part of the motivation touchstone tool is this accepted and exploring table, where we actually document what the operational definition is of the critical key terms in the project that we're working on. And then we try and share this as widely as possible. so that number one, our science is accurate. Number two, our science is useful. And number three, our data projects are actually making operational choices that are as aligned as possible with our equity goals. And when those operational choices cannot be aligned with our equity goals, because no real world project is perfectly aligned with all of our equity goals, we know where and we know why. The documentation is very important. Okay. I know I'm going fast, but it's just an overview of choices. So, one of the choices we made was how we were going to operationalize this. I want to make sure that we have time to show you two more choices. So, I'm going to go past this description of what the program actually was. You can read that. Of course, hundreds of choices involved in how they did that. And I am going to show you some of the analytical choices. So when it comes time, I'm skipping over how we collected the data because, of course, how you collect data is a really important choice. What kind of data relationship you build. I said I was skipping over it, but I can't bring myself to skip over it. I'm going to share it. So the data relationship is the social contract that we make every time we're collecting any kind of data. And one of the reasons I really don't like to skip this part is that in this particular project, you can see, I think up here, yes, that there's a lot of people, 36,000 farmers. That means when we collected data from 36,000 farmers, we hired and trained enumerators. People got paid to literally walk around rural Bangladesh and conduct surveys. Those enumerators are basically in charge of establishing a very important social contract, a data relationship between our program and our data collection activities and the people who are going to be contributing data. And so we needed to train those enumerators in our equity goals. Everybody in this project was going to make choices that influenced who got prioritized in the actual results, because the relationship that a person has with the other person that is physically collecting data from them changes what actually goes into that data. So if you want to train enumerators, whether they're front desk people who take admin, as in like somebody's filling out a library card application, or you're working at a school and a person's registering a kid for school, whoever's collecting that data, or even if you're building an AI agent that's going to ask these questions and put them in a data thing, somebody has to understand the nature of these questions about price, value, ownership, and profit. And again, we have lots of reading and video material if you want to know what I mean by the details of that. But this is a very important choice. All right. So after we got our hands on some data, now we're going to analyze the data. And when it comes time to analyze the data, we have so many questions that we need to answer about the choices that we're making. So, okay, one of the choices that we made, one of the most important choices that you make when you are doing a descriptive analysis, a lot of this is a descriptive analysis, is what denominator are you going to use? What unit of analysis matters to you? So you can see when we measured household income, we made a choice. Average daily household production. That's a very important choice, right? Hugely important choice that might not get noticed because it sounds very mundane. It sounds like what most people would do, but taking an average and using the denominator of daily household production is frankly a very Western industrialist way to think about production and household income. It's not the only way that we could calculate how much milk was getting produced or what the household income was like. It's a very Western industrialist approach. And that's not surprising because that was part of the motivation of this project. But it's really important to notice back to the thing you've been seeing. This is where we're going to document that. So this choice here, what denominator are we going to use to calculate household productivity? And we should have a conversation about that with as many diverse hands-on stakeholders as possible. And if it's not possible to have conversations with anybody about it, not assign anybody to gather options and consider options other than ourselves or our own research team, then we need to do our best to really consider the equity implications from a diversity of social locations. All right. So you can see why sometimes when we go through this, it takes like 3 or 4 hours just to show you how to do this. And of course, to actually do it, to actually go through an entire data project, noticing, documenting, and making choices takes longer than 45 minutes. The last thing I'm going to show you, just because I think it's really, really fun, and I want to end on a fun note, and then we're going to ask questions, is that one of the choices getting made here in the data equity framework, we talked about funding, like who's going to get paid. We talked about motivation. How are things going to get operationalized? We talked about data collection. What's the relationship going to be like? We talked about analysis, what denominator. Communication distribution. What I'm showing you here, and I put the link in the chat, is from like a very conventional communication vehicle. So we chose initially an extremely where is it? Oh, here it is. Great. So here's the link. This is what I'm working from, right? This is a very conventional communication vehicle for what happened in strengthening the dairy value chain. And you can see that it is designed, the choices that we made about language and length and branding and visuals and methodological detail are really oriented towards a very specific group of people, which were not the women that owned cows and were living in rural Bangladesh. And so we didn't feel great about that choice, that set of choices, although we needed to make some choices like this in order to fulfill our granting obligations. So there are other choices you can make. And one of the other choices that was made, I did not make this. I'm just sharing this with you, is a very, very cool thing. And I put the link in the chat. And this is the English version of this. This exists in other languages. It's called a dairy tale. And this was actually made in very close collaboration with the people whose data was in the project, people who were taking care of the cows, and people that we were trying to center. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I just really, really love it as an example of who gets centered when we make a lot of choices in communication. This is every bit as rigorous and accurate a communication as this is, but it centers a very different group of people. We changed milk is very, very cool way to kind of just summarize the ultimate successes of this project. This project wasn't an immediate success, but we learned a lot and it did have some successes. So it's actually narrated at the beginning by Milk, which I really, really like. And then we also hear from women that own cows. And again, I'm not going to read this whole thing to you, but I just wanted to give you, and then I just want to, yeah. scroll down to, there is some actual quantitative charts, and there are talks about changes. So we're not saying, you can't include conventional percentages and numbers and impact citations, but it doesn't have to look like this. There's nothing inequitable or wrong with it looking like this, but we really do need to consider, who does this prioritize? What set of worldviews and values is this conforming with? And who does this prioritize? And what set of worldviews and values it does this prioritize? All right. So again, I'm aware that this was a whirlwind tour of what it kind of, the thought process and the work process of noticing, documenting, and making choices as we go through any kind of a data project. And again, this is what I do all day, in and out. So I don't think that it's a good idea to try and focus on all the choices in all the steps of the projects that you're working on. It's much better to figure out maybe one or two choices that you think would make a big difference or make a big step in helping you align the work that you're doing with your values, and just focus on documenting, noticing, and considering options for one or two choices until that feels integrated and successful and good. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to open it up for questions. If you're in the room and you want to turn your microphone on and ask a question, this is the time to do that. You can either just turn your microphone on, or you can raise your little Zoom hand and we will turn your microphone on. And I'm also going to share while you decide if you want. Can you see a purple screen with an email on it? Is that what you see? Yes. Okay, good. One of the questions in the chat is a great question. How do you justify the extra time or extra work that it might take to use the choice documentation template? So that's a very, very common question. And I'm glad you asked it. I meant to talk about that. And it really varies based on the situation that I'm in. But essentially, and this is also related to my personality, I would not say that I am excellent at organizational change. I'm a mathematical statistician. So if you are excellent at organizational change, you might have a better answer to this, and feel free to turn your mic on and tell us. What I do is I try and pay attention to what is important to the people who are worried about it taking extra time. So if senior management is like, we're not going to spend time making that table of all the operational definitions, that's going to take way too long. Or we're not going to have a meeting where we talk with Bangladeshi farmers about denominators, because we're fancy, Harvard economists. I should badmouth Harvard right now. Go Harvard. But we're fancy North American economists, and we don't really need to talk about denominators with farmers from Bangladesh. I try and figure out what they do care about and help them see how taking the time to document these choices is going to be good for what they care about, as well as equity. So if that fancy economist cares a lot about rigor because their stuff's going to get peer reviewed, I help them understand that just making choices about denominators on automatic pilot is actually going to lead to mistakes and open them up to criticism when they try and get their paper peer reviewed and published. And that is what I do in that situation. In terms of the funders, I do the same thing. Like, are you trying to get the most useful information possible? Then we need to make sure that everybody working on this project is working on that same operational definition of monthly income, or the millions of dollars that you're investing are actually just going down the drain because we're not going to have meaningful results. Again, that's the way that I approach it. I'm not an organizational change management guru. Another question in the chat is, I'm going to kind of paraphrase it, is how do we talk about the fact that these choices are present in our data projects without losing trust of people that think that the existence of choices means that science is pretend or isn't worth trusting? And that's a very, very hard question, actually a much harder question than the organizational change question. And the answer to that is having a couple of really good examples ready to go in your back pocket that illustrate how paying attention to choices in science produces results that people can really make life choices based on. A couple of examples in your back pocket that are more simple than you think they need to be is the way to go. Oh, thank you so much, Meridian. I'm so glad to hear from you. I love that. I always feel better when people tell their organizational change ideas, because I don't always feel comfortable. And I know Meridian has some great ideas. So I really appreciate that. All right. We need to wrap up because we're almost out of time. I want to say two things. Thing one is we are absolutely, we rushed through paying attention to choices today. It is the fastest going through of choices that I've ever attempted, but we were getting so many questions that I really thought it was worth the try. So I hope it was useful. And if you are interested in really doing this at a much slower pace, where everything I covered in that 35 minutes, we cover in like 6 hours. We do that about every few months in a workshop called the Foundations of Data Equity. And I don't usually mention our workshops when I'm doing Talking Data Equity, because it's really important to me that Talking Data Equity is not a place where we do sales, where we're not being like, come to our workshops. So I never mention them. Once in a while, people get frustrated with me because they're like, what? I really wanted to come to your workshop. So I'm going to mention just this once, this workshop. And the reason I feel comfortable mentioning it right now, we are doing it in the middle of June, so in about 10 days, is that we know that if you are living in the United States and also in Canada, you are experiencing, either directly or indirectly, a lot of economic and political turmoil. And so we have opened up that June 16th and 17th Foundations of Data Equity workshop at no cost to anybody who's lost their job as the result of this turmoil. And I'm also going to open it up to anybody who is part of the Talking Data Equity community. All you have to do is write us an email. You don't even have to send like a long justification. We're not asking for like proof, because that's not the way we roll. If you want to come to this and you don't have the professional development funds available, we want you to come. We want to put tools into your hands. It comes with a certificate of completion. So if you're in the job market, I know personally, I have a kid who's in the job market because of Doge. I know it's rough, and we really want to do everything we can to support you as part of our community. So reach out if you want to come and spend 6 hours talking about what we just did in 30 minutes. We'd love to have you. We would be thrilled. Second thing is next week we have a very, very awesome person, Dr. Crystal Tsosi. She's the founder of #DataBack. She is an indigenous genomic scientist. I know it's giving me goosebumps just think about it. So she's going to come and talk about genetic research and indigenous data sovereignty, which is such an important topic for genomics, but also informing AI and everything else that is happening with that kind of data. So I would love if you can come next Friday and ask some live questions. If not, we will put up the recording. And yes, I will go and find what's going on with last week's recording, and we will get that up as soon as possible. So we're going to leave it there. And I really want to emphasize to my talking data equity friends just how much it means to me. I often say I do talking data equity so that you know that you're not alone. But I often do talking data equity so that I know I'm not alone because data equity is so important to me. And when you read the news or look at social media, you can think, oh my God. But the fact that all of us keep showing up each Friday and talk about something new and share the highs and share the lows really means the world to me. Take really good care of yourselves, take really good care of each other. And you have our email. Stay in touch. Bye, everybody.